I remember the exact moment I understood my marriage had been a performance, a script my wife had been reciting while living an entirely different story behind my back. I was standing in my father's hospice room in Tucson, holding his hand while the monitors beeped their slow, indifferent rhythm, and my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor Gary that said, "Hey man, just wanted to make sure you knew there's a guy living at your house. Thought you should know." My father passed 4 hours later. I didn't cry. I just stood there, reading that text over and over. The two worst things in my life arriving on the same Tuesday afternoon like they'd carpooled. Let me back up. My name is Daniel. I'm 51 years old. I work in commercial HVAC, and for 19 years I was married to a woman named Well. I'll call her my wife, because she doesn't deserve more real estate in this story than necessary. We met when I was 32, married at 33, bought our house in Mesa, Arizona at 35. No kids. We tried for a while. Then we stopped trying. Then we stopped talking about it. And somewhere in that silence, a distance grew between us that I kept telling myself was just the natural settling of a long marriage. I was wrong. That distance wasn't settling. It was her making room for someone else. My father was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in March. He was in Tucson, 3 hours south, living alone since my mother passed in 2019. When the doctors told us he had maybe 8 to 12 weeks, I didn't think twice. I packed a bag, arranged with my company to work remotely where I could and take leave where I couldn't, and I drove down to be with him. My wife said she understood. She said all the right things. She hugged me at the door, told me to take all the time I needed, that she'd hold things down at home. I was gone for 6 weeks. I came home twice during that period, once in week 2 for a long weekend to grab more clothes and handle some paperwork, once in week 4 because my wife said she missed me and wanted to see me. Both times the house looked normal. Both times she was warm, attentive, cooked dinner. Both times I drove back to Tucson thinking I was lucky to have someone solid waiting for me while I dealt with the hardest thing I'd ever faced. My father died on a Wednesday morning. I spent Thursday handling the immediate arrangements with the funeral home, called my wife and she said she was sorry, said she'd come down if I needed her. I said I was okay, that I'd be home in a few days once I got things sorted. She said, "Take your time. I'll be here." Then Gary's text arrived Thursday evening. I sat down on the edge of my father's hospital bed. They hadn't taken it away yet. And I stared at that message for a long time. I typed back, "What do you mean, a guy living there?" Gary replied within a minute. "Been there about 3 weeks, I think. Parks a blue, phone 150 inches the driveway every night. I figured maybe it was a relative or something, but it seemed like you'd want to know. 3 weeks. I had been sitting in hospice rooms and parking lot cafeterias, eating vending machine sandwiches for 6 weeks. And apparently, for the back half of that, my wife had been running a completely different household in my house. I didn't call her. That was the first decision I made, and I think it was the right one. I didn't text, didn't give any signal that I knew anything. I just sat in that room for about an hour, breathing, thinking, letting the anger move through me until it settled into something colder and more useful. Then I called my buddy Rick. Rick is a contractor, one of my oldest friends, and more relevant to the situation, he has a work van, a trailer, and absolutely zero tolerance for nonsense. I told him what Gary told me. There was a long pause, and then Rick said, "Tell me when you need me and I'll be there." I told him Sunday. Friday, I handled the death certificate, the funeral home contracts, my father's bank accounts, the mechanical grief work that keeps you moving when moving is the only thing keeping you upright. I found myself grateful for the tasks. They kept my hands busy and my mind focused on logistics rather than the image forming in my head of some man sitting in my living room, sleeping in my bed, using my shower. Saturday, I drove back to Mesa. I didn't go home. I drove straight to Rick's place, slept on his couch, and spent the afternoon on the phone with a family law attorney named Patricia, who had a Saturday consultation slot available, and a very calm, practical way of laying out my options. What Patricia told me was this. The house was in both our names, purchased jointly, and in Arizona that meant I had every right to be there, and every right to remove my own property. She advised me to document everything, change nothing in the financial accounts yet that would come in time, through proper channels, and to not do anything that could be construed as threatening or destructive. She also told me to get a hotel room that night, and not make my move until I had a clear head. I did exactly that. Sunday morning, Rick pulled up to my house at 9 a.m. with his trailer. My wife's car was gone. The blue F-150 Gary had mentioned was also gone. Sunday morning, apparently, was when they went out together. I had texted Gary the night before and asked him to let me know if they left, and at 8:47 he sent me a thumbs up. I had a key. I walked into my own home. Standing in the entryway, I took a moment to just look around. Everything seemed normal on the surface. The furniture, the pictures on the wall, the same rug I'd bought at a Home Depot clearance sale 6 years ago. And then I looked closer. There was a gym bag by the couch that wasn't mine, a phone charger plugged in next to my recliner, a pair of men's shoes by the door that were 2 sizes smaller than mine. Evidence, everywhere, of someone making himself comfortable in my life. I went upstairs to the bedroom. His clothes were hanging in my closet, not on one side throughout, his mixed with mine, as if they'd been redistributed deliberately. My things had been compressed into the far left corner. 3 dress shirts I'd owned for years were gone from their hangers. I found them later, folded in a box in the corner of the guest room, along with my grandfather's watch, which had been moved from the bedside table where it had sat for years into a shoebox like it was clutter. I sat on the edge of the bed, the same sheets. I didn't want to think about it, and I made a list on my phone of everything that was mine. Then Rick and I got to work. We took my tools from the garage, every last one, the table saw, the router, the full rolling cabinet I'd spent 15 years filling. We took the 6.5-inch TV I'd bought 2 Christmases ago. We took my recliner, my grandfather's watch, my good cast iron cookware, my fishing equipment, every piece of outdoor furniture I'd purchased, and the chest freezer in the garage, with my name written on a piece of tape on the back, from when we'd briefly stored it at my brother's house years ago. We took the second car, a 2019 Tacoma in my name only, which had been sitting in the garage while I'd driven my truck to Tucson. I also took the dog. His name is Bear, a 7-year-old black lab, registered and microchipped in my name, licensed in my name, vet records in my name. Bear had been mine before I was even married. He came to the door wagging when I walked in, and when I loaded him into Rick's van, he just curled up on the seat blanket like we were going somewhere fun. It took us 2 hours and 40 minutes. Before I left, I did one last thing. I walked through the house, and I collected every document with my name on it. Tax returns, my passport, my social security card, insurance policies, the title to the Tacoma. I found them in the home office, organized in a filing cabinet I'd set up years ago. Everything was still there, which told me my wife hadn't thought to secure them, which told me she hadn't really thought this through at all. I left my key on the kitchen counter. I didn't leave a note. I didn't feel like one was necessary. I also called the alarm company that afternoon and changed the passcode on the home security system, since the account was in my name, and added a new contact number. If anyone opened a door or window at that house, I would be notified, and they would not. Then I checked into a Residence Inn, ordered a pizza, and watched football with Bear asleep across my feet. My wife called at 4:17 that afternoon. I let it ring. She called again at 4:22, then 4:31. Then she sent a text. "Where is all your stuff?" I didn't respond. Then, "Daniel, where is Bear?" I watched those messages come in with the same detached calm I'd felt since Gary's text 2 days earlier. Something had happened to me in that hospice room. I think some capacity for shock had been used up, and what was left was just a very clear view of what needed to be done. At 6 p.m., she called again and I answered. She started talking before I could say anything. Where was I? What was going on? She'd come home to find half the house empty. What had I done? We needed to talk. I let her finish. Then I said, "I know about him. I've known since Thursday. I want you to have your attorney contact my attorney." And I gave her Patricia's number. The silence on the other end lasted a long time. "Daniel, please don't," I said. "I'm not interested in the explanation. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'm not coming back to the house. Handle things through the attorneys." She said his name. She started to explain how it happened, how long it had been going on, how she'd been unhappy. I heard the words, but I'd already set the phone down on the nightstand, face down, and by the time I picked it back up, she had stopped talking. "Good night," I said, and hung up. Over the following 2 weeks, through Patricia, I learned the full picture. He had moved in approximately 3 weeks after I left for Tucson. He was someone she'd been involved with for, based on what eventually came out, at least 8 months before my father got sick. She had not told him she was married, or had told him some version of events in which I was already a ghost. He, for his part, seemed genuinely surprised to learn that the husband he'd heard was basically gone, was actually a living person with tools and a truck and a very good attorney. He moved his F-150 out within 48 hours of my visit. The divorce took 8 months. Arizona is a community property state, which meant the house was split and eventually sold. The proceeds were divided. My retirement accounts, which I'd been contributing to since before the marriage, were evaluated and partially protected. The financial settlement was not what I'd hoped, but it was clean, no drawn-out war, no scorched earth, just a methodical accounting of a 19-year marriage reduced to line items. What I did not expect was how good I would feel. I'd prepared myself for devastation. I'd been told by well-meaning people, friends, my brother, even Patricia in her careful attorney way, that divorce after a long marriage is grief, that I should expect bad months, that I should see someone. And I did see someone, a counselor named Marcus, who met with me every other week and helped me understand what I'd been carrying for years inside a marriage that had stopped being a marriage long before my father got sick. What I found, sitting in Marcus's office talking through 19 years, was that I had been quietly diminishing for a long time. Small things. The way my opinions got edited out of joint decisions. The way my friendships got slowly isolated, nothing dramatic. Just a consistent drift until Rick was one of maybe 2 people I actually talked to. The way I'd stopped doing the things I loved, fishing, woodworking, camping, because they were always inconvenient, always a little too much to accommodate. I hadn't noticed because I'd been busy being a husband, being dependable, being there. Bear and I live in a rental house in Scottsdale now. I have a workshop in the garage. My tools are set up exactly the way I want them. The table saw positioned where I can work from both sides, the rolling cabinet against the wall where I can see all the drawers from the doorway. I've finished 3 furniture pieces in the time since I moved in: a dining table, a pair of Adirondack chairs, and a blanket chest that I built in memory of my father, using wood from a ponderosa pine he had stacked in his garage in Tucson for 20 years, meaning to build something himself. The chest sits at the foot of my bed. I fished the San Juan River in New Mexico last fall with Rick and another friend, and I caught the largest brown trout of my life on the second morning. Standing in that cold water with the current pushing against my waders and the canyon walls rising up orange on both sides, I thought about my father, who loved fishing and was patient in a way I'm still learning to be. I thought about everything that had happened in the past year. I thought about the fact that I was standing in one of the most beautiful places I'd ever been, with nothing waiting at home that didn't want to be there. I thought, I would not go back and change any of it, because I would not trade this feeling for that life. I know the optics of that might seem strange. I lost my father. I lost a marriage. I lost 19 years and a house I'd fixed up with my own hands and a version of the future I'd been quietly counting on. But what I found on the other side is harder to explain without sounding like a greeting card, so I'll just say this. I take Bear for a long walk every morning before work. I have coffee on my porch and watch the desert turn orange in the early light. I call my brother on Sundays. I work on things with my hands in the evenings until I'm tired enough to sleep well. My wife, my ex-wife, sent me an email 8 months after the divorce was finalized. I don't know what prompted it. It was long and detailed, and covered a lot of ground I no longer needed to revisit. Near the end, she wrote that she hoped I'd find happiness, which I thought was a generous thing to say, and also about 3 years too late. I didn't respond, not out of anger that had been gone for a long time, just because there was nothing left to say. Some conversations finish themselves whether you close them or not. I took Bear for his walk instead. The morning was clear. The mountains to the east had a thin line of pink along their ridges where the sun was just beginning to show. Bear trotted ahead of me on the trail the way he always does, nose down, tail moving in slow arcs, entirely present in the way that dogs are, without memory of yesterday or plans for tomorrow. I thought about my father saying once, when I was young and impatient about something, I don't even remember what he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Daniel, good things take time, and some of the best things take the longest of all." He was talking about a tomato plant, I think, but I've found it applies to most things worth having. I have time now. I intend to use it well.